Hello, everybody, and welcome to Keep It Spiritually Simple. I'm your host, Sandra McEllis, and what a beautiful day it is. I am so fortunate to have Dr. Nancy back on to continue to talk about plant medicines and all the ins and outs of it. And right now, our topic is part 2 on uh, illegal drugs and why it's considered a legal drug, et cetera, and all that, how that all happened. But before she begins to go into her awesomeness and her expertiseness, I would ask each and every one of you to hit the like, subscribe, share, and comment button so that others can see this video as well, because it helps the algorithms and the videos swirl around and lands on somebody's phone or on their laptop, and they say, oh, who are those cool ladies? I want to watch them or listen to them. So we appreciate every single like, subscribe, share, and comment. So Nancy, we were talking about um, these plant medicines being illegal in the United States. So my real question was, was this a criminalization driven by politics, culture, economics, or is it kind of that war on drugs kind of thing? Like, how did this all kind of come about? And in your book, Master Plant Teacher, which you guys can get on many different platforms, which we'll announce at the end, but Nancy is kind of referring to this book that took her a year to write. So when she says, here in my book on such page, it is Master Plant Teacher. So entheogens, all that. How did that become such a class 1? Can't get it unless you're a very special entity like a church or something along those lines in the United States?
Yeah, it started with the 60s, the 1960s, the psychedelic, that whole time period that happened. And there was actually a lot that was going on in the 1960s in the United States. I mean, I go briefly, I touch into it in my book because we had we just had so much going on. And the psychedelics was just only one of what was actually happening in the 60s. So our culture was changing quite a bit. And I think that the government officials in the news media and the reporters and stuff, it was just they saw that so much of this had gone onto the street, and they just really didn't know how to handle it. So the reaction was just clamp down and shut down everything, even though there was currently at that time in the 60s research that was going on LSD. But they stopped that as well. And so we had a period of, I think it was like 20 or 30 years, we had no research on any psychotropic plants at all. And then that changed and it opened up again. So I believe it's been the last 20, 25 years we've been doing now research has started again. And we've learned so much on these psychotropic plants and what they have to offer us. And so again, I'm going to say that I'm not going to sit here and say this is for everybody. It's not for everybody. People come to the medicine for different reasons. And we're just talking about this as for educational purposes only. And so I'm not going to advocate somebody to go out and do something illegal. It's not what it is. It's mostly for discussion and education purposes only. So, but yeah, I think it was just an overreaction at that time. And then it kind of was reintroduced again for us to do research, which was nice. And we've learned so much about these plants. These plants have changed so many different people's lives for a variety of reasons, which we talked about in part 1. So I wanted to go in and read now this section, just one paragraph that I pulled out from chapter 6. Entheogens and psychedelics are no longer underground and forbidden to be discussed. Entheogens have been suppressed and declared illegal, and people have been prevented from being able to use them as psychotherapeutic. It has been proven that entheogens are not addictive or habit forming, and in fact have many healing properties. If a person has a religious practice that includes entheogens, then the government has told the public that it is illegal to practice their personal entheogenic sacred spiritual rituals unless they are a member of a few approved religions recognized by the United States government. And I know we talked a little bit about that too in part one. And they can you could probably I know I've Googled what countries that the psychotropic plants are legal in, and so there is research that people can go online to find out about these churches and that type of thing, where it is, if you're a member of them, then you're approved through the Religious Exemption Act of 1993 that you're allowed if you're a member of one of these approved churches. So in chapter 7, we have governmental agencies, state laws, and religious establishments that have blocked people's ability to have access to entheogens and psychospiritual medicine. The very nature of shamanism is connecting people with spiritual realms and providing mystical experiences. The religious establishments do not want people to gain access on their own. Religious systems feel threatened by allowing the freedom to have direct experiences, for they like control. People are to stay in rituals and only hear about these spiritual realms. If one is able to access other realms directly, then there is no need for an intercessor or the religious belief system as an intermediary. Source does not need a spiritual liaison. And one more chapter, and then I'm sorry, one more paragraph, and then we'll talk about this. In the United States, it is legal to possess a gun, yet it is illegal to possess a psilocybin mushroom. Gun violence, mass shootings, and gun-related crimes in the United States cause so much pain, suffering, and deaths. Why are plant-based entheogenic consciousness expanding psilocybin mushrooms illegal? Psilocybin mushrooms are not known to cause deadly harm to humans, yet they do cause those who ingest them to start to question and re-examine humanity's dysfunctions in society, a new way of relating to each other and all of life on this planet. People are realizing that the way we live and interact with each other needs to improve, yet the entheogens are here to help humanity move beyond this consciousness level. Humanity's upgrading to a higher vibrational level of consciousness will cause an environment in which all life will thrive on this planet. Nature has an intelligence that needs to be respected. We need to listen to what nature is trying to tell us. First, plants are sentient beings. Second, the plant kingdom is here to help humanity. Third, we need to listen to their wisdoms. Humanity needs to live in harmony with nature. Mother Nature created a harmony within humans. This is why we feel better with time spent outdoors in nature. So,
Mm.
yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I when I wrote this, again, it's my dissertation put into book form, so it's highly researched. And again, we won't be able to cover everything on your podcast. That's why I think it would be a good idea for people to purchase the book. But and I think the other thing too is if people have questions, to definitely, write into Sandy, and we'll be happy to discuss these questions further on future podcasts too, because it is kind of neat to see what the interest is out there for people.
Mm-hmm.
But I did find it very interesting that a person could, they're allowed to possess a gun, which kills people, but if you have a psilocybin mushroom in a Ziploc bag in your pocket, you're going to jail. So, and the psilocybin is not going to kill people. So I just thought that was very, very interesting. And that's why I put that in my book. So that's why it'll be nice to see it more and more legalized in states.
Well, I also like you pointing out the fact that the plants are sentient beings.
Hmm.
And if you have ever come across plant music where someone's been able to capture the music of a plant,
Mm.
it is, oh my gosh, it hits every note beyond what you even thought your body held. It's so incredibly beautiful. And we all know that the foods that we eat come from plants, and the nutritional value and the frequency value of that plant. And so most medications have come from plants, but they're made in synthetic forms
Mhm.
because then they can be licensed, they can be controlled, their dosages, etc. And somebody gets very rich off of that.
Mhm.
But the stability of actually producing plants to put out there is a little different ball game. And so I do believe that a lot of this, yeah, sure, it might have been like, oh my gosh, we don't know what's happening, close the blind, shut it down, etc. But there's also, we know that there's a hidden agenda to keep people from maybe really experiencing more of their divine plan for themselves that they don't know about, or understand why they're suffering from a disease of some sort, mentally, physically, or emotionally. Because we store traumas in our body from everything, and each of us have different nervous systems where our body records that trauma. It could be what might bother me may not phase you in the least, right? But it could be a curse for me to live with something that I don't understand it. And I feel like, these plants have a hypnosis, a natural hypnosis to them to allow you to bypass that gatekeeper and get in there into the storage unit and find some nuggets of treasure and discard the things that don't serve you anymore.
Mhm.
So I think when you look at who might be trying to keep you from being able to do that and why they lock it down, yeah, I think we can all figure that out. We don't even need to get into it, but more information is coming out about it. More people like yourself who've done extensive research and have vast knowledge, are able to interpret and express, and bring this up so that more people have this in inquisitiveness to, hey, I want to know a little bit more about that. It may not be for me, but I just like to know about it. Because,
Mhm.
like I said to you, since we've had these recordings, my phone wants to pop it up all over the place.
Mhm.
And it's like, I had no idea that this center talks about it and this person talks about it and this one does this. And, it's in different places. So, where do we go from here, Nancy? Where do we go from here with this lockdown of being a class one to being able to share the information as we are?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't even know if I have the answer for that. I mean, I think that, the way I always say, well, write your politicians and ask them to, but I mean, I don't know as far as, I think it's going to evolve on its own. I think that what happens is people aren't going to wait for the government to change it. I think they're going to just take care of it themselves, where that's why they leave the country, and it's to change themselves. And so it's not about maybe changing the government, it's really about changing yourself. And I think that's another reason why people have these life-changing experiences. And I think this culture just doesn't want to read about it in a book anymore. I think they want to have direct mystical experiences themselves. They're tired of reading scriptures that say, okay, these people had all these experiences. Well, like, well, I want them for myself. I don't want to read about
Mhm.
others that had these experiences, mystical experiences centuries ago. I want to have them myself. I want to actually have these and experience, have direct experience. And
Mhm.
so we have a new way of looking at spirituality right now. And I actually think that's a good thing too, because people are more open than they ever have been. And I think our society has so much demands on us that people just, they're tired. They're tired of the same old routine that's not feeding them. It's really, it just doesn't work anymore. And I think people with having these opportunities to have self-discovery and to have these mystical experiences, it's life-changing. So, and you bring up a really good point I want to touch on is the plants singing, and they do sing, but we've gotten so far away from nature that we can't hear them sing anymore, but they do sing. And centuries and centuries ago, humans were telepathic and they communicated telepathically with the plants, with the animals, with the bird kingdom and the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom and all these different ones. And we had rock kingdom. We had this open communication. And somewhere along the line, our telepathic abilities, we lost them, but we still have those. We're still capable of having telepathic abilities. I did an experiment at the time. I had a dog, and it's since passed, but I had this whippet, and I would telepathically talk to the whippet, and I would say, "Go get your toy," and then they would go get his toy. And then I would do different, all these different things to think maybe it was just the look I had was what made it think to get the toy. And so I would do all these things, and the animals definitely, they know how to communicate with they haven't lost that ability, and neither have the plants and all these different sentient beings. I don't know where we got this idea that humans are the only sentient beings on the planet. That's not true at all. We're all sentient. We're all ensouled, and so therefore we have this communication abilities across the different kingdoms. And I believe with the changes that's happening on this planet vibrationally, we will be more and more able to have these telepathic abilities will be turned back online with the light codes being turned on in our DNA. We're going to have more and more of these abilities, the psychic abilities that we've always had them, and we still have them. They just kind of somehow got turned off, but now we're going to be getting those turned back online again, which is great.
It is. And when you're saying that, I'm thinking of people with house plants, just, all different kinds of house plants. And it's been proven that the ones who talk to their plants,
Hmm.
the ones who structure their water, the ones who, you know, really exchange a love and giving them a lot of love, those are the plants that flourish and grow. And these people have these amazing house plants. It's taken me a long time. I'm still not, my plants don't look anything like those, but I, I have a couple that have been stragglers, and I talk to them, and they should have been gone a long time ago. But I have two pots and they're stragglers, and I'm just like, I love you. You might look a little scruffy, but I just love you. And thank you for not leaving my life, even though you look scruffy, and maybe you're reflecting my scruffiness. I don't know, but I like having the company. So imagine what these fully fortified, misunderstood powerhouse plants have inside of them and how they could dialogue with us. You know, you can hold them, you can eat them, you could, put them in a tincture. I don't know how you even do it. I'm just making this up. But I'm sure you could just even call on the plant medicine without even being in its presence energetically,
Hmm.
to experience that. That's just what's coming through for me intuitively right now.
Hmm.
And I'm starting, the more I'm listening to what you've been sharing, because I knew nothing before we started these series. That's why I think it's important for the viewers to go back and look at all, and we're going to be doing more, right? Go back and look at previous episodes and listen. I feel like I'm developing a relationship with these mystical plants that I didn't know I had. And it's
Hmm.
not a mental connection, it's in my gut. It's a visceral feeling just below the heart. And then
Hmm.
it kind of seeps up into my heart. And I'm enjoying what you're sharing and your experiences and your wisdom. I just feel like you have so much to offer the community, just to broaden your knowledge on something about a plant that has been kind of misunderstood and hidden,
Hmm.
how powerful it is.
Yeah, I can't say enough. DMT is not foreign to us. That's what makes these psychotropic plants illegal is the DMT in it, but our brain produces DMT every night in order for us to go to sleep. So it's not a foreign substance that we're putting into our body. The brain actually makes DMT. We need DMT to live. It's that important. Our brain actually
Mhm.
we need it so much that the brain produces it, makes it. And yeah, it's so interesting because You know, when I was in some of my sacred ceremonies, the trees talk to me, the flowers talk to me, the grass talk to me. And then you start having these mystical experiences where you're one with the grass. You are the grass. You are the planets, the stars. You get these experiences like that would be known as cosmic consciousness, the oneness. You're one with everything. So you'll hear people say, I was one with the planet. I was one with the stars. I was this, all this stuff. I was one with everything. It's cosmic consciousness. And in a sense, it is a form of enlightenment because you definitely come back a different person than you did before. And you start to realize the oneness of we're all one. We're all part of the one, and how this sense of separateness is an illusion only when you're in physical form. We have this sense of separateness. And so we can't understand this sense of personal identity until we take on human form. But as a soul, you know, you come into some of these dimensions, there is no separation. It's just one. It's just oneness. And we've just kind of we need to have this experience in physical form here on the Earth School. There's a variety of different reasons why we come into physical form, and we have all these experiences. One of them is learning duality. Um, and and so but yeah, it's there's so many teachings that people have just within the experiences that makes it so impactful that that's why they can't always even put it into words. It's even hard sometimes for people to even verbalize this. And but it just leaves such it marks your soul. You know, it actually leaves a mark on the soul, actually in a good way. And because you've had these inner mystical experiences, and you'll hear a lot of people come back and they'll say, well, the other side seemed more real than this reality, than the physical form, because this physical reality is just the land of the five senses, what you can see and touch and feel and all this stuff, taste. And but there is realities upon realities that's way beyond our five senses. And that's where these allow you to cross the veil into these other realities. And then you come back, and this reality seems more dull. It actually seems more, not as more dreamlike. You'll hear him say, life is but a dream. It's very
Mhm.
dreamlike. And because the higher up you get in these upper dimensions, and really there is no such thing as higher and lower because of this whole oneness, but we use these descriptions because our mind needs to somehow be able to sort this out and make sense of it. So we'll talk about upper and lower dimensions, but really in the scheme of things, it's kind of really just a sense of oneness that we're really connecting back into, a sense of we're a piece of source, and having this physical experience so that we can understand more deeply our true identity.
Wow, that's powerful. And I was getting the vision of like peaks and valleys. If you were literally walking through peaks and valleys, but think about it energetically, the peak doesn't mean, down there, but we
Mhm.
interpret that because we're physically or energetically going down there and then we're peaking upward. So one's not better than the other because they're all learning experiences. And you also brought up something about, being one with the plants and the grass and the trees. And I have a little place that I used to go to a lot, and it was a labyrinth, but it was cocooned in with some trees with a little
Mhm.
playground. And so I would go and sit on the bench, and I was cocooned in enough where there was a lot of traffic around, but I wasn't distracted by other things. And so as I just sat there over time, the trees would have all these faces in them, and
Mhm.
then the grass would rise up and I would see all these beings in the grass, and it's sort of like out of a Disney movie. It was just, I didn't know what I was experiencing, but I knew that it felt so magical. But yet I knew the cars were going over there. I knew I was sitting on the bench. I knew where the sky was. And I noticed that when the little kids came to play at the playground, more faces came out in the trees, more faces came up from the grass, and the blades of grass would move in a way that it was like a dance. And I've always thought to myself, wow, that is so powerful, but I had to sit here to go through all of that, right?
Mhm.
But if I did some, I communed with a particular plant medicine, it may take me to a whole other realm of experiencing that with more answers to help me understand my own life in this moment,
Hmm.
or why maybe it brought me to this moment, or what moment would be more beneficial than say another moment, so it gave me more insight into my choices
Hmm.
moving forward. And I feel like by understanding the plant medicine and communing with this plant medicine thing, I'm starting to feel more communion with this whole thing. And like I said, I started walking by my stragglers just last night going, I think you just need a little sip of water. Yeah, I know I watered you a week ago and you're good, but I just feel like I just want to give you another little sip because I just love you just looking at me. You know?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So where do we go from here, Nancy? I don't, I mean, we've talked about so many different things with plant medicine and why it's been illegal. And I know you have a nice poem that came through you want to share here at the end, but what else do we want to say about what you just read,
Oh gosh.
or where you want to go?
I just it's so I never yeah, I never did drugs when I was younger. I just was it was I was not attracted to them. And so for me, I kind of think it's kind of funny that, here I write a book on psychedelics and and it's my dissertation put into book form. And so our culture is really the stigma isn't there like it used to be, especially the ones that are, these are plants and I call them the master plant teachers because even within the plant kingdom, there are teachers. There are master soul teachers. There are consciousnesses that have incarnated into the plants to help humanity. And so that's why this whole thing of oh, I don't know if there's sentient beings, and I bring up that experiment. I think we touched on that a little bit in a prior podcast about the experiment. It came from, I cited the source. I cite all my sources, obviously, but it came out of The Secret Life of Plants. And there was this experiment on this geranium. I don't know if you remember that discussion where the geranium was put into this room and there was electrodes put attached to one of the leaves on the plant, on the geranium, and it was hooked up to an echocardiogram, or not an echocardiogram, but it's kind of like one of those that measures the graphs on the graph paper. In this case, my memory, and uh, and
Like an
so
EKG for plants?
yeah, yeah. It was. I'm trying to think of the term when when you look at the response. And what they did is they measured the response of when this person came in and did all these horrible things to this plant. And then they, burned the leaves. They put acid on some of the leaves. They did all these mean things to the plant. And of course, the graph paper, the needle on the graph paper is just going crazy because it's hurting it. And then another person came in and they put, they sprayed the leaves that were burned with like misted water, and they played music for the plant. They talked to the plant, and they they did all these wonderful things. They put like aloe vera on the plant and gave it plant food, and the lines on the graph paper smoothed out. And so then they brought back the mean person, the person that was mean to the plant, to see if the plant remembered the person who did this to them. And then again, as soon as the person walks in the room, the needle goes crazy on the graph paper. It actually did remember this person that was mean to it. And then they brought the person that was nice to it, and then again the needle smoothed out. It was just a straight line. It was very interesting how it proved. And speaking of music, there was another experiment that was done where they put a collection of plants, potted plants, in one room, and then they put another collection of potted plants, a variety of them as well, in another room, and then in one room they played like acid rock music and all this screeching horrible music, and the plants all died. And then the other room, they played classical music, spa-like music, relaxing music, and they just doubled and tripled in size in the growth. So they obviously do respond and are alive. And so, yeah, I just, there was so many aha moments when I was researching and writing this dissertation that Spirit told me you have to put this in book form and publish this because I know it'll touch a lot of people's lives. But there is a lot of aha moments. We're gonna drop some bombs here in these podcasts because I remember sitting back going, oh my gosh, this was really, it took, I learned a lot in my process of researching and writing the dissertation. And but I think it'll probably generate quite a bit of stir for people because I think it's going to touch people in many different ways. And that's why I always encourage people, please write into Sandy if you have any questions or topics related to this you'd like for us to talk about, because it's definitely rich in so much wisdoms here that what we're talking about. And I think it's also helps change the way we interact with life. And that was one of the things that they found after people had gone through sacred ceremonies. They were much more gentler on the planet. You
Mhm.
know, they really got into eco environment and really maybe some people became activists and that type of thing because this just can't happen on its own. Now, it doesn't mean that the activists are any better than anyone who's not doing active work, but I think it just opened up so many people's ability, they opened their mind as to realizing that we do share the planet with a lot of plants and animals, and we seem to think that we can just do whatever we want to the planet, but the planet actually really requires us to live in harmony with it. And so they found that a lot of the participants were they actually went more into the type of belief systems that were more eco-friendly, like Buddhism. You know, you don't hurt any other living being. And so, yeah, it's kind of interesting how our perspective changes when we go through some of these sacred ceremonies.
Well, I think we find that our relationship changes with a lot of things because we realize how deeply connected we actually are,
Mm-hmm.
and I know for me, the more connected I just get with my own spiritual self, the more I have such admiration and respect for everything, like including a fly that would come in the house. Hey, 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 now I'm going to need you to get out that door. And nine times out of 10, they'll go. I've seen them fly around outside, and I go, please don't go in that door that's open. Don't do it. Don't do it because you might get a smackdown. And I don't want to see that happen. Right. Same with the bees. The bees will actually land on me, and I'll go, okay, now listen up. That's nice. However, I don't want you to accidentally miscommunicate and sting me and lose your life over it. I am in such awe of the trees going through the breeze and how they look, and the leaves falling right now here in the DC area. And there just comes this, I don't know, it's more than just a cohesiveness. It's just that you
Mm-hmm.
feel a much deeper DNA intertwined. That's not acceptable to hurt anything, and I want to be more loving with everything, whether
Mm-hmm.
that's running up and down the stairs because thank you wood you made the stairs, right? That comes from how I gently or not so gently do something, and then I
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge it and back it up and become a little more gentle or softer with what I do in my own expressions. So you keep yourself in that level of love alignment and you exude that, and then you'll see how much of the universe, including the plants, come up to greet you. They
Mm-hmm.
were always there. And you were talking about the hearing the trees and things like that. When I did a vision quest, gosh, 20 years ago, and I was out there in the woods floundering around for the day trying to figure out what epiphany was going to fly into my head that was going to make this all worth my trip. And I just remember putting my ear to the trees, different size trees. And once you got past the movement of the wind and the noise of the earth, they had a particular sound, each of them did. And then how I was able to kind of hear that sometimes elsewhere. But
Mm,
that's a practice you've got to keep up with,
mm.
right? Because then your frequency is more in tune with that frequency. And this is what we're talking about. And this is what you talk about when you get disconnected with nature and how we
Yeah.
need it.
Yep.
And
Yeah, it's
so
fun.
this plant medicine helps you get more connected with you as nature.
Yeah, it's so interesting and funny how you bring up all these experiences because it brought up an experience I had many years ago, and I was out just walking my dog at the time, and there was this huge grasshopper. I've never seen such a big grasshopper. This guy was massive. And I'm looking at him, I'm staring at him. And I guess he noticed there's this big tall being looking over it, and he's like, and I'll never forget the look on this grasshopper's face. He turns his head up and he's looking at me like, please don't step on me. It's like, because I'm like this giant, compared to this grasshopper, and I'm just admiring how big this grasshopper is. I'm like, don't worry, I'm not gonna hurt you, and he was just so happy, he's like, okay, I'm glad she's just looking at me, she's not gonna step on me or something. And but yeah, it's and I have another funny experience. I was out walking my dog, and I had this one particular dog was so inquisitive, and he never hurt anything. Some dogs chase different things like lizards and stuff. He never did. And we're walking along on the sidewalk, and all of a sudden there's this ant crossing the sidewalk, and my dog decides to sniff the ants. He's so inquisitive. He's like, I wonder what this thing smells like. Dogs are so, they're all in descents. And I'll never forget the look on the ant's face. The ant turns its head up, and it's like, quit sniffing me. He's like, enough, don't sniff me. It was like, and it was very upset that it was being sniffed. It was so funny. I just started cracking up that they all have their own personalities and everything. It's just so, but yeah, I think in an earlier podcast, we talked about, maybe it was off camera, or maybe it was on camera, but I talked about I was taking a walk in my neighborhood, and I saw this ant, and it actually taught me a lesson. And that's one thing we forget, that nature can actually teach us lessons. And this ant was so happy. He was carrying this, I don't know, this white piece of flake of something. He was going back to the little opening where the ant colony was, and I could just really feel what he was feeling. And he was just so happy. He was like, oh, I got something, like a really big find. When you go back from shopping, and you're like, oh, look what I found. And it was just sheer joy. And sometimes we forget what that feels like. And the ant was just so, just like blissed out. He was so happy at what he could contribute and bring back to the to the ant colony. And I was like, ah, that is such a good lesson, to forget. Just we forget it, but it was a good memory to remember how to just be happy on little things, little things, and just bring it back and share that with others. And but I found that nature really can teach us a lot of lessons.
I agree. And I think sometimes we take it all for granted. In this area, we have a lot of squirrels. And, you see a squirrel, you see a million squirrels. They all look alike. They all do the same things. Um, I had a squirrel stuck in the wall, and I kept trying to knock on the wall and ask it to get back up and get out, because I was going to have to call an exterminator to figure it out. Well, it didn't leave. I had to have the exterminator come. I said, I don't want you to kill it. He goes, well, I see where it got in. I could put this thing on the outside. Once it comes up and out, just can't get back in. I said, all right, let's do it. So before he did that, he left the room, put my hand on the wall, and I said, dude, I asked you nice to leave. Unfortunately, now I got to kind of force you. You're not going to be able to come back, so on. The squirrel leaves. But the very next day, one of my cushions on my chair on my deck that I've had for 20 years was torn to shreds. Then I look up in the tree, and this squirrel had made an entire apartment with that cushion. And I was like, it was like a sci-fi movie, but it was like, this isn't really happening. Well, with my sense of humor, I was like, you SOB. You were stuck in the wall. You can't, you're not paying me rent, dude. You got to go. Right. So now you go out and you tear up something because you're having a temper tantrum, but then you build a house right in front of mine without an easement or any licensure or any building permits using my material. And then now you're going to stare at me. So I
Oh.
remember standing out there going and looking at the tree, and I think the tree was laughing. And I just said, life is so simple, and we have so much to learn from nature.
Mhm.
And we just are so busy. We're in crowded homes on top of each other, apartments, condos, townhouses, more streets, more people.
Mhm.
That much of the nature has had to run somewhere else. But we do have plenty of nature in every single neighborhood. And just to take the time, whether it's a balcony, a book, anything, to connect more with nature, with plants, with the medicine of all that has to offer us, and intertwine with that, because we are just one big heartbeat. We truly
Yeah.
are. and
Yeah.
and you talking about all this plant medicine, and then us just taking, again, we're never rehearsed, going left field, talking about ants, squirrels, bees, flies, the whole thing, because it's all interconnected, because we would be nothing without it. I was walking the other day and I heard Spirit say, what's more important? What's priority? Earth, like, the ground, air, or water? And so as I was walking, I said, one cannot be without the other, was my answer. And it was such a, like, wow, that was like powerful. You can't have air if you don't have an earth, what's the point of having it? Water you can't have if you don't have the concrete earth for it. But all of them is essentially important, and then all the inhabitants of that is essentially important. So I want to thank you for opening up that pathway for me to connect more with that. So when I get done with this, I want to go take a walk, and I want to just observe the trees and the birds and the plants and the grass and the leaves, and maybe some things I haven't noticed. I want to commune with that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, well, prepare yourself because when you start doing that, you'll get some interesting conversations. I'll never forget, I stepped out in my backyard one time and boy, this bird was telling me off. This bird was so angry. It's like, can you believe this? Blah, blah, blah. You always trim all these bushes. All these bushes have to be perfect. You know, you messed up my home and it's giving me hell. Let me tell you. It's like we don't see it from the animal's perspective. And then I had deer, this when I was living in Florida, a lot of deer would come into my backyard and the deer are like staring at me. And they're checking in with me and they're saying, when is humanity going to wake up? When are they going to get it? When are they going to realize, you got to share the planet with all of us? And yeah, I know, the plant teachers are working on it. That's why I call in the back of my book, they're ambassadors for the planet. And but yeah, it's very interesting when you realize some of these gifts that we have that's been suppressed, and then you start opening them up. It can kind of get, in a way, it's an eye opener. It really is. I never thought about, birds don't always like the bushes look nice and neat and trimmed, but they don't always like that because it messes up what's going on with them, their nests and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's prepare yourself, but it'll be definitely enlightening, that's for sure.
Well, I'm going to start even like making notes about what I do experience from this enlightenment from all of our conversations thus far. I can't wait to explore more. But I believe that you had a poem you wanted to talk
I
about.
do. Yes, I do. Actually, this poem, it's called Sacred Brew, and it's located on page 198. Now, remember, the page numbers are for the printed text, the soft cover and hardcover, but if you're getting ebook, it's a different format, so it's going to be listed on a different page number. But for the printed versions, um, and it's on page 198. And also, if you'd like to hear this book, some people are really into Audible, so you can also get Master Plant Teachers on Amazon Audible as well. But so this again, the poem is titled Sacred Brew. You have come to the table of the divine brew, universe of wisdom in every cup. Master plant teachers have called you. Awaken, we will show your divinity. Every drop causes ecstatic states. Each drink of the sacred brew brings your celestial family near. Master plant teachers facilitate the meeting. Visitation of your origin dimension. Revelations, downloads, awakening. Knock at the door of your reality. Suffering caused by living in illusion. Sacred brew breaks the spell. Consume. See your divine radiance. Sacred brew of ambrosia frees you from the trap of this temporary reality. Reveals your divinity within. Heals your pain. Delivers connection to omnipotent source love. So I have 45 poems, spiritual poems in the back of this particular book, Master Plant Teachers, but that was just one since we were talking about the psychotropic plants and that there is a sacred brew, that people actually do have, that they do experience when they're in these sacred ceremonies. I know ayahuasca comes in a brew. But so everyone has their plant teacher that will call them. And if you don't know, if you're not being called, then don't go forward. But you'll know when you're being called, because what you're finding, Sandy, is that all of a sudden you're hearing about all this everywhere. That's what happened to me. Mother Ayahuasca started calling me, and every time I turned around, there was something about ayahuasca. And it's kind of interesting how it's turned into pop culture, ayahuasca in particular, because The Simpsons did a little episode on ayahuasca. They didn't say the word ayahuasca, but they called it kind of like this brew that you take. And it had all these innuendos that it was anybody who's very familiar with ayahuasca knew that that's what they were alluding to. But yeah, I think the next 5 to 10 years is going to be very interesting, because I think we're going to see more and more um, centers open up where hopefully these get released off of Schedule 1 classification, so that they can be now prescribed by doctors, and you can go to a facility and have these have access to these plants.
Well, I think that's extremely powerful. I mean, right now we're seeing a lot of things changing. We're seeing black warnings coming off of like hormone replacement. We're seeing, so many more things that have been a big no-no that you had no idea could be a possibility or even a yes, because we just allowed the government to do what we thought they were supposed to do. And now individually, we're all stepping up and saying, hey, we want to know more about this. We want to do the research on this. We want to find out how this can help us be a better human living this experience, and have a better, spiritually driven neuro pathway being our number one, versus the steps that we're told to take throughout our life. And then we wake up and realize, what am I doing? I feel like I'm spinning my wheels, or it's Groundhog Day every day, and there's no meaning, and I'm not getting fulfillment. And if I don't have meaning and fulfillment, I'm not giving it to my partner, my relationships of any kind, work, personal, kids, house, you name it, because we get into these lower vibrational, very humdrum, just above depression, right? Feelings. And then that leads to a lot of things. And if you go to your standard practitioner, well, there's a standard protocol that they're going to hand you that most likely is not going to be long term for you, because you're going to realize that wasn't working either. So I do like the fact, and I do want to talk more about the fact that these are not addictive, maybe on the next show, and that they come into the system and they dissipate from the system. So it's not like they linger and you have cravings and so on, how they can really come in and help you see where the addiction evolved, some of the root causes, and how to detoxify and remove those from the system. If that's even a possibility, I don't know. I want to know more about it. If you're willing to chat about that on one of the upcoming
Course.
episodes.
Yes. Yeah, that's called purging. A
Thank
lot
you.
of people purge with ayahuasca, with psilocybin, not so much, and some of the other ones. But she's removing a lot of trauma and a lot of the negative vibrational frequencies that you were exposed to, whether it be through your childhood, growing up, maybe on the job, maybe through relationships, who knows? It starts to pile up, and like you say, a lot of this is stored in us, and then it turns into diseases, dis-ease, and next thing we're running off to the doctor, but a lot of it is trauma based and it needs to be cleared out. And so it's really a new way of looking at things. And I think more and more people are informed consumers. I think back in the old generation, we just did whatever the people of authority told us, whether it was the teachers or doctors or what have you. But now people are questioning and they're wanting more than just the usual. And so now they're willing to explore things they never thought that they would even consider exploring. And I think that's where a lot of these psychotropic plants, and again, within the plant kingdom, there are master plant teachers. These are the teachers. These are the wise ones. And and so they come to the wise ones to seek healing of all different levels. Many and a lot of people get healed in all levels. And it's so life-changing. That's why they're just like, and people say, "Oh my gosh, you're not the same." If they see him 6 months later, you're not the same person. It's just what used to be of interest to you now is of interest. And there was I think it was during COVID, and I was in a particular group via Zoom. It was like a spiritual group and I think it was actually Patreon. And one of the people that was in the group was saying he was at a Zoom call for business, and and one of the questions was, okay, share one thing. Each person had to share something to the other coworkers on the call that nobody knows about you, something that nobody would know about you. And this person thought about it and he decided to share, well, I actually did ayahuasca. And he didn't know how people were going to react. I mean, he was like really stepping out on a limb here. And people, it was the opposite of what he expected because people were like, oh, how was that? What was that like? Oh my gosh, I've heard so much about that. And everyone was so fascinated by it that it actually surprised him. So I think that shows that our society has really changed. The stigma just isn't there. I mean, like we have musicians, we have athletes, we have scientists, we have engineers, we have all these people in all these different fields that say, well, if it wasn't for these master plan teachers that's come into my life, I wouldn't have gotten this breakthrough, or I wouldn't, it upped my game in athletics, it higher performance, faster in the brain. It speeds up processes in the brain so they can invent or have these cures or these inventions. There's so many people now, these recipients for the Nobel Prize, they openly express their gratitude to the master plan teachers because they'll say, well, if it wasn't for ayahuasca or whatever, whatever particular one that the plant master plan teacher called them to the table, they said that this invention wouldn't have been created, or I wouldn't have been able to fulfill what was needed. So it's really a very wonderful time right now that we're really now in actually what they're calling a psychedelic renaissance, that we're coming back and we're starting to really appreciate what nature has. And it's more than just what you ingest for food, that actually this is this plant medicine, and that's why they changed the name from psychedelics to entheogens, is to denote it's plant medicine. It's plant based. So that there's a sacredness to these plants that are helping humanity and actually awaken to their divinity, that you are a divine being, and they're proving it to you. They're showing you. A lot of these people, they cross the veil and they're like, oh my gosh, they actually get to see and have these mystical experiences, also known as self-realization, or in the East, they call it self-realization, or self-actualization in the West, but self-realization. So they're actually seeing when everything's stripped down, your personality, your ego, your mind, your body, everything's gone, and you see you're this divine being. You're the spark of the divine, actually the pure source essence. You're it's so it's mind blowing. It just blows their mind because they go, that is who you are. It's like nobody tells you this. You inherently know, oh my God, that's me. That divine presence is me. That source energy, your pure source energy. And when you actually get to see who you really are, it just it just totally, it'll blow your hair back, let me tell you. I mean, you never look at yourself again. You're like, okay, I'm in human form, but this is just temporary, and you don't worry about, nobody fears death anymore because they've experienced it. They've crossed the veil, they've come back, there's nothing to fear, everything's great. They've had these amazing experiences. They've been seeing so much more. And so I think that and then of course people come back to the medicine again and again because there's more. They feel there's like a time when, and it's not a lot of times right away. I mean, sometimes many years can go by and they'll have this feeling of like, okay, I need to come back to the medicine. And then others are like, I'm good. I can hear my teacher, my master plan teacher very clearly. And so it's again, there's no um I'd say each soul is so unique that the path is geared just for each soul. What you're meant to experience, you'll experience. And that's why you never should compare your experiences with anyone else. They'll say, well, how come that person experienced self-realization? I didn't get that. Well, I think that there's a lot of other reasons that people need to experience first, that they have to have other experiences and clean up other areas, maybe that's more important in their life. Because really, there's this expression that says Mother Ayahuasca doesn't give you what you want, she gives you what you need. So if your life is a train wreck, she's going to clean up your life first before we get into some of these other mystical ecstatic states, because that's what's really important right now. And because it's all within you, and it's, you're not really, like I said, you're not really going outside of your body. It's all these dimensions are within your cranium, from the third eye to the crown chakra. And that's why they say, oh, do we only use like 10 or 20%? Well, the other rest of the brain is being utilized because that's where all these dimensions exist. Jesus even said the kingdom of heaven is within. It's all within you. You're such a divine being, the vastness inside of ourselves. We see ourselves as so mere small mortal beings, but there is such vastness of just dimensions upon dimensions upon dimensions that's within us, that when you start exploring this, it just really is amazing. And that's why a lot of these great master soul teachers will say, well, how do they travel these vast expanse of time and space? Well, they don't go outside their body into the cosmos to travel it. They go inside, they'll meditate, and they'll travel these vast distances and go into these other dimensions within themselves. And so yeah, there's so many wisdoms and richness that comes just with self-discovery. And that's one of the things that I found when I would come out of sacred ceremony. I have to go into integration, which is needed after each ceremony. We're integrating what you experienced. And so many people were like, I'm so glad that you were in my integration group because they'll ask what brought you to the medicine. And I said, well, I came for spiritual purposes, for attainments. And they were just so thrilled to find that there was more. They were like, I just wanted out of my pain. I didn't know there was attainments. And it's like, oh yeah, there's a lot. There's much more. And so yeah, a lot of people come in for self and God realization, or in the West we'll call it self actualization or and divine union. But it's just remembering. It's just remembering what we forgot before we, when we before we incarnated. Your memory, a lot of your memory's wiped, so that you can get into this life and get lost in it. And that is part of, when you come into the school, earth school, so you can just immerse yourself in this illusion we call the third dimensional reality. And it's illusion because it's temporary. So when you step outside of time and space and matter and you go into these other dimensions, then you start, there's actually a lot of wisdoms and teachers on the other side too that can meet with you. But yeah, there's so much to this that it's not recreational. People are coming to the medicine for a variety of reasons, and it's life changing. And I think that's part of what's helping humanity wake up.
Yeah, and in order to kind of maneuver away from the fuckery, so to speak, we have to become aware of the entrapments that we're living in. And so we can't do that when we've got all these invisible bondage and programs that we're locked into. And I was hearing there while you were speaking, this is a not just a this is not a therapeutic luxury for the few. It is a therapeutic necessity for the all.
Mhm.
And so that was coming through while you were speaking. And we have to bring things into our awareness so that we can understand that we've been stuck. We're locked down. We need to stretch out. We need to move. We need to use parts of our brain that we have never experienced because we're just used to being in that everyday program because the lineage before us did it and the lineage before that did it. And then it takes courage to step out there and do that. And some think it's going to really mess up their whole life, but it's actually the beginning of a new life if you have the courage to kind of say, hey, I don't like the way things are at this moment for whatever reason, whatever acute, chronic, or minimal thing that's going on in your life. It may not be, whatever your cue is or trigger to step off that crazy train and just, look at it from a different viewpoint, a different aerial point. You may see that you need to open up to nature more and to see if there's some other teachers out there to help you into more of an authentic soul self, your true God self that you came here to be, not just living on the railroad tracks that have been designed for you by others who created that world. So you just keep going around, around, around like a dog chasing its tail. Next thing you know, your kids are running around, your grandkids are going to do the same thing, and it's just going to keep going. So you got to hit the brakes, pump the brakes, say, stop the madness. So, what better way to do that than to explore plant medicine, to explore educating yourself on other realms of being to help you be a better being in this world? So,
Mhm.
Dr. Nancy, thank you so very much again. Eye-opening, mind-blowing, heart comforting, gut twirling. I feel it all right now, and I can't wait to get outside and get in nature a little bit. I look
Yeah.
forward to hearing what our viewers think. So hopefully they'll leave some comments. Guys, it's really best if you flip over to my YouTube channel, Sandra McEllis, and then I look at those comments more than I do anything else. So if you want to leave one there, and then Dr. Nancy, where can people find you?
My website is nancyclarkphd.com. Yep.
Okay, and then you started a YouTube channel where you're reading your poems.
I do. I have been, it's an ongoing project. My team is putting them together. They're putting it to music and beautiful scenery, and then the actual poem is scrolling on the screen, and I'm actually narrating it. And I've gotten a little into the master plan teacher videos. They're in process of being edited, and soon they'll be up as well. So on my website, you can take a look at all my books, and it has the links. If you click on, there's at the very top, one of the tabs is books, and then it'll be a drop down of all my books. And when you click on each book title, it'll have a front cover of the book, a description of the book, and at the very bottom, there's hyperlinks where you can just go click on that, and it'll bring you right where you can purchase it. But yeah, it's I got 3 more titles. I'm working on my 5th book now. I've got 3 more titles that I'm going to be coming out with over the course of many years with all of the research writing and publishing. But it's my pleasure. I really I've it's after ayahuasca came into my life that I she asked me to sit down and actually go back to school and then start research writing and publishing. So it's and that's why I dedicate all my books to ayahuasca. So all my books have been dedicated to her, and the next 3 titles that'll be coming out will be as well dedicated to her. She changed my life so in so many ways that I couldn't help but dedicate all my work to her.
Well, thank you for taking the journey with her so that you could share it all with us. Thank you for going ahead of us and bringing this back to us. We appreciate you. All right, everybody, like, subscribe, share, and yeah, we'll see each and every one of you on the next video. But please go back and look at previous videos with Dr. Nancy and some of the other ones that are posted out on Keep It Spiritually Simple. Like, subscribe, and share to those as well. All right, so much love, everybody, and say goodbye, Dr. Nancy.
Bye, everyone.